These are some topics that I've seen brought up before, so this video is going to answer 3 questions. Why wasn't Glorfindel a member of the Fellowship? Why were the members of the Fellowship chosen? And why did they not help Gandalf fight the Balrog? Let's start with this last sentence. Just in case, I'm going to give you context about who Glorfindel is and what he's done. Glorfindel was born in Valinor during the Year of the Trees and would later become a lord in the hidden elven kingdom of Gondolin in the First Age. After learning of the city's location, Morgoth, the great evil of the world, would attack Gondolin with his army of wolves, orcs, balrogs, and dragons of the brood of Glaurung, and they would become now many and terrible. Soon after the siege began, it was clear Morgoth's force was too much for Gondolin. The remaining lords and ladies of the houses gathered remnants of the people and escaped through a secret passage under the city that led them through the valley of Tumladen to a passage in the mountain called Cirith Thornath. Along that narrow way, they were ambushed by orcs, for Morgoth had set watchers all about the encircling hills, and a Balrog was with them. Many are the songs that have been sung of the duel of Glorfindel with the Balrog upon a pinnacle of rock in that high place, and both fell to ruin in the abyss. Due to Glorfindel's heroic sacrifice and the great eagle Thorondor dealing with the orcs, the remnants of the people of Gondolin were able to escape. Among these survivors was the man Tuor, lord of the House of the Wing, and his elven wife Idril, who prepared the secret passage under the city. She was the daughter of Turgon, king of Gondolin. Along with them and the rest of their people was their son Eärendil, who was only 7 years old at the time of the siege. He would go on to marry Elwing, granddaughter of Beren and Luthien. Together they would have twin sons, Elros and Elrond. Elros would live to be the first king and founder of Numenor, whose descendants would found the realms of both Arnor and Gondor in Middle-earth, and I'm sure you know the significance of what Elrond would go on to do. Without Glorfindel, Tuor, Idril, and Eärendil would have likely died, meaning no Elrond, no Numenor or Gondor, and no Aragorn or Arwen. Tuor and Idril were one of 3 partnerships in Tolkien's writings where a man and an elf married. The other 2 were Beren and Luthien, and Aragorn and Arwen, the former being ancestors of the latter. Also, as a side note, Eärendil is arguably Tolkien's most important character of them all. At the end of the First Age, he would essentially go on to save all of Middle-earth from Morgoth's destruction, but that's a tale for a different video. After a time, Glorfindel would be re-embodied and sent back to Middle-earth around the time Sauron created the One Ring during the Second Age. He aided Gil-galad and Elrond and may have played a large role for them, but his exploits would mostly go unwritten during that time. During the Third Age, a little over 1,000 years before the War of the Ring, the realm of Arnor was at war with Angmar and the Witch King for centuries. Then, a force under Glorfindel, the Elf Lord, came up out of Rivendell, and the realm of Angmar was defeated. Then the Witch King laughed, and none that ever heard it ever forgot the horror of that cry. But Glorfindel rode up on his white horse, and in the midst of his laughter, the Witch King turned to flight and passed into the shadows. For night came down on the battlefield, and he was lost, and none saw whither he went. Glorfindel, looking into the gathering dark, said, "Do not pursue him, he will not return to this land. Far off yet is his doom, and not by the hand of man will he fall." These words many remembered. Over 1,000 years later, about 2 weeks after the Witch King stabbed Frodo on Weathertop, Glorfindel would stumble upon Aragorn and the hobbits while on their way to Rivendell. To Frodo it appeared that a white light was shining through the form and raiment of the rider, as if through a thin veil. Glorfindel was out looking for them, actually. He told them that he came across 3 of the riders on the bridge of Mithaithel. The Ringwraiths would turn and ride away from Glorfindel, and then he would come across 2 more, and they would do the same. There are 5 behind us, and they are not all. Where the other 4 may be, I do not know. I fear that we may find the fort is already held against us. Glorfindel would place his hand upon Frodo's wound, and his pain would even subside for a time, but it was beyond Glorfindel's skill to heal, so he placed Frodo upon his horse. Then, Glorfindel would feel and hear the sound of the enemy behind them, and soon enough, all 9 riders would be surrounding Frodo, and Glorfindel cried out to his horse in the elf tongue, "Noralim! Noralim, Asfaloth!" At once the white horse sprang away and sped like the wind along the last lap of the road. Like a flash of white fire, the elf horse, speeding as if on wings, passed right before the face of the foremost rider. Frodo heard the splash of water. It foamed about his feet. He was across the ford. And Frodo, with his last bit of consciousness, saw a shining figure of white light with small shadowy ones behind it on the other side of the shore. He would awake in the last homely house east of the sea on the morning of October the 24th. So why wasn't Glorfindel a member of the Fellowship? Let's fast forward a bit to the conversations leading up to the forming of the company. This will also begin answering our second question. Why were the specific members of the Fellowship chosen? During the Council of Elrond, after everyone tells their stories of the enemy and everything else out of the ordinary, Gandalf presents the question, what shall we do with it? Referring to the One Ring. Frodo revealed that the ring had no control over Tom Bombadil, and it was suggested that perhaps he should take the ring and hold on to it. Glorfindel says that would only postpone the day of evil, for Sauron would find the ring, and Tom Bombadil would not have the strength to withstand him. Not only does he not have the strength, but Elrond would decide that even Rivendell, Lorien, and the Grey Havens do not have the strength to stand against Sauron. If the ring was taken and hidden away, or cast into the sea, Sauron would eventually come for it and find it. It seems to me now clear which is the road that we must take, said Elrond. Now, at this last, we must take a hard road, a road unforeseen. There lies our hope, if hope it be, to walk into peril, to Mordor. We must send the ring to the fire. The road must be trod, but it will be very hard, and neither strength nor wisdom will carry us far upon it. This quest may be attempted by the weak with as much hope as the strong. Now that it was decided what needed to be done with the ring, and who could go on this quest, who was the first member of the Fellowship? Well, the first person to volunteer was actually Bilbo. For the movie viewers, he was the one who stood up for Aragorn when Boromir doubted him, not Legolas. Gandalf would gently deny Bilbo, telling him that his part in the tale of the ring should be over, and he cannot take it back. Shortly after, the soon-to-be first member of the company spoke. I will take the ring, said Frodo, though I do not know the way. If I understand aright all that I have heard, said Elrond, I think that this task is appointed for you, Frodo, and that if you do not find a way, no one will. But it is a heavy burden. I do not lay it on you, but if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right. But you won't send him off alone, surely, master, cried Sam, jumping up from the corner where he had been quietly sitting on the floor. No, indeed, said Elrond. You at least shall go with him. It is hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he is summoned to a secret council and you are not. Only Frodo and Sam were decided when all the talking at the council had finished, but soon after, while the hobbits were having their own meeting in Bilbo's room, Gandalf would visit them and tell Frodo that he would come with them as well. If the ring is to set out, it must go soon, said Elrond. But those who go with it must not count on their errand being aided by war or force. They must pass into the domain of the enemy, far from aid. I will choose you companions to go with you, as far as they will or fortune allows. The number must be few, since your hope is in speed and secrecy. Had I a host of elves in armor of the elder days, it would avail little, save to arouse the power of Mordor. The company of the ring shall be 9, and the 9 walkers shall be set against the 9 riders that are evil. With you and your faithful servant, Gandalf will go. For this shall be his great task, and may be the end of his labors. For the rest, they shall represent the other free peoples of the world, elves, dwarves, and men. Legolas shall be for the elves, and Gimli son of Gloin for the dwarves. They are willing to go at least to the passes of the mountains, and maybe beyond. For men you shall have Aragorn, son of Arathorn, for the ring of Isildur concerns him closely. Strider, cried Frodo. Yes, he said with a smile. I would have begged you to come, said Frodo, only I thought you were going to Minas Tirith with Boromir. I am, said Aragorn, and the sword that was broken shall be reforged ere I set out to war. But your road and our road lie together for many hundreds of miles. Therefore Boromir will also be in the company. He is a valiant man. We know why Aragorn was chosen and why he would bring along Boromir, but why Legolas and Gimli? Gandalf, Aragorn, and the hobbits were the only ones who knew about the One Ring before arriving at Rivendell. The other 3 weren't called there by Elrond. They, or someone they knew, sought his advice for other reasons. Gimli accompanied his father Gloin to Rivendell on behalf of the dwarves. During the council, Gloin would speak of the lonely mountain in Moria. He spoke of Balin and how he took Ori, Oin, and many dwarven folk into Khazad-dûm. For a time they were sent news and things seemed good, but that was about 30 years ago and now things have gone silent. Then Gloin would talk about a messenger that came to Dain at Erebor, but not from Moria, from Mordor. The messenger was sent by Sauron, asking about hobbits, a thief in particular who stole a ring. He came to warn Bilbo and for Elrond's counsel. Legolas came to Rivendell to give news about Gollum. He would finally speak up after Gandalf mentioned Gollum had been captured by Mordor and tortured for information, which is why the enemy knew of a hobbit with a ring. After leaving Mordor, Aragorn captured Gollum and placed him into the custody of the elves of Mirkwood. Legolas would go on to tell the council that Gollum escaped, not for lack of watchfulness, but perhaps overkindliness. But there we have it, our reasons as to why Legolas and Gimli were at the council, and why Elrond considered them. Pippin insists on himself and Merry being the last two members of the company. Elrond disapproves with a sigh and makes it clear he thinks they should remain behind, especially Pippin since he is so young. Surprisingly, Gandalf would be the one to encourage Elrond in allowing them to come, insisting that they should trust rather to their friendship than to great wisdom. Even if you chose for us an elf lord such as Glorfindel, he cannot storm the Dark Tower, nor open the road to the fire by the power that is in him. As they left Rivendell, since the company's hope was in secrecy, they took with them little gear for battle, but they were all given thick, warm clothes and fur-lined cloaks by Elrond. They intended to travel through the mountain peak of Caradhras, but their plans fell apart due to spying black crows, wolves, and a blizzard which had snow up to their chests. The misty mountains had proved to be too dangerous, and it was clear they couldn't continue. Their only other route was underground, through the mines of Moria. Only Gandalf and Gimli wanted to take that road. In the books, it's actually Aragorn who's most against going through Khazad-dûm, unlike the movies where it's Gandalf. They went on through Moria for several hours before resting, and were eager to get their journey underground finished. After their first night of rest, they awoke to the realization that they were now on the east side of the mountain. Even Gimli was glad to be leaving soon, as Moria had grown dark and they saw no signs of Balin. That was until they spotted a light coming from a room near the 21st hall. They hoped the light came from a window they could look out of, but as they got close and entered the room, they realized they were looking at a tomb. "Here is written in the tongues of men and dwarves," said Gandalf. "Balin, son of Fundin, Lord of Moria." "He is dead then," said Frodo. "I feared it was so." Gimli cast his hood over his face. The day before reaching the chamber of Mazarbul, Pippin felt compelled to drop a loose stone down a well not far from where they are now, which, as they would soon find out, alerted creatures of the deep. What would follow would soon be Gandalf's first of his two interactions he had with the Balrog. One after another, orcs leaped into the chamber. Legolas shot two through the throat. Gimli cut the legs from another that sprung up on Balin's tomb, and Boromir and Aragorn slew many. When 13 had died, the rest ran off shrieking, and the company ran for the east door. "Off you go, all of you, down the stairs," said Gandalf. "Wait a few minutes for me at the bottom, but if I do not come soon, go on." "We cannot leave you to hold the door alone," said Aragorn. "Do as I say," said Gandalf fiercely. "Swords are no more use here. Go!" The company had to feel their way down a long, dark flight of steps. They looked back up and saw nothing except the glimmer of Gandalf's staff. He seemed to be standing by the door still. Frodo thought he could hear Gandalf muttering words from above. Then there was a flash of light and a heavy thud. Gandalf came flying down the stairs and fell to the ground in the middle of the company. Well, that's over," said the wizard, struggling to his feet. "I have done all that I could, but I have met my match, and I have nearly been destroyed. But don't stand here. Go on. You will have to do without light for a while. I'm rather shaken." It was unknown to him at that moment, but Gandalf just had his first encounter with Durin's Bane. After an hour of running down 7 flights of stairs, Gandalf believed they ought to be down to the level of the bridge and the gates by now, but he was very weary. Gimli took him by the arm and helped him sit down on a step. "What happened away up there at the door?" he asked. "I do not know," answered Gandalf, "but I found myself suddenly faced by something that I have not met before. I could think of nothing to do but try and put a shutting spell on the door. I know many, but to do things of that kind rightly requires time, and even the door can be broken by strength. As I stood there, I could hear orc voices on the other side. At any moment I thought they would burst it open. I could not hear what was said. They seemed to be talking in their own hideous language. All I caught was gash, that is fire. Then something came into the chamber. I felt it through the door, and the orcs themselves were afraid and fell silent, and then it perceived me and my spell. What it was I cannot guess, but I have never felt such a challenge. The counterspell was terrible. It nearly broke me. For an instant the door left my control and began to open. I had to speak a word of command. That proved too great a strain. The door burst in pieces. Something dark as a cloud was blocking out all the light inside, and I was thrown backwards down the stairs. I have never felt so spent, but it is passing. There is some new devilry here, devised for our welcome, no doubt. But I know now where we are. They were in the second hall of Old Moria, and the gates were near, just beyond the bridge. To the west was darkness, But out in the center of the hall, a great fissure had opened, and flames came licking out. The company took off running across the smooth floor of the hall. They heard the beat and echo of many hurrying feet behind them. They had been seen. Legolas turned and set an arrow to the string, though it was a long shot for his small bow. He drew, but his hand fell, and the arrow slipped to the ground. He gave a cry of dismay and fear. The ranks of the orcs had opened, and they crowded away as if they themselves were afraid. Something was coming up behind them. Then, with a rush, it leaped across the fissure. Flames roared up to greet it and wreathed about it, and a black smoke whirled in the air. Its streaming mane kindled and blazed behind it. In its right hand was a blade like a stabbing tongue of fire. In its left it held a whip of many thongs. Aye, wailed Legolas. A Balrog! A Balrog has come! Gimli stared with wide eyes. Durin's bane! He cried, and letting his axe fall, he covered his face. A Balrog, muttered Gandalf. Now I understand. He faltered and leaned heavily on his staff. What an evil fortune, and I am already weary. This was the only time Legolas showed fear while on their journey. Even when approached by a Nazgul flying overhead, an enemy whose presence is specifically known to cause fear, Legolas did not falter and was able to set an arrow loose. Over the bridge, cried Gandalf, recalling his strength. Fly! This foe is beyond any of you. I must hold the narrow way. Fly! Aragorn and Boromir did not heed the command, but still held their ground, side by side, behind Gandalf at the far end of the bridge. The others halted just within the doorway at the hall's end, and turned, unable to leave their leader to face the enemy alone. The Balrog had reached the bridge. Gandalf stood in the middle of the span, leaning on the staff in his left hand, but in his other hand, Glamdring gleamed, bold and white. His enemy halted again, facing him, and the shadow about it reached out like two vast wings. It raised the whip and the thongs whined and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, but Gandalf stood firm. If you've seen the movies, what happens next is mostly the same, minus some great details from Tolkien. The biggest difference would be that Gandalf used Glamdring to parry the Balrog's strike, erupting in a stab of white fire instead of a magical shield, which, as you've read, is probably because he was too exhausted to keep using his magic at that point. He cannot stand alone, cried Aragorn suddenly and ran back along the bridge. Elendil! He shouted. I am with you, Gandalf. Gondor! Cried Boromir and leaped after him. It was at this moment that Gandalf lifted his staff and smote the bridge at the Balrog's feet. The demon fell forward and plunged into the gulf, but even as it fell, it swung its whip, and the thongs curled around the wizard's knees, dragging him to the brink. Fly, you fools! He cried, and was gone. So why did none of the Fellowship help Gandalf fight the Balrog? Legolas tried and failed due to fear. Gimli could hardly even look at it. Aragorn and Boromir stood firm, and eventually tried to leap into action, but that was just as Gandalf smote the bridge. It wouldn't surprise me if Gandalf heard the shouts of the men in that moment and decided to end the fight then and there. Even if they caught up to Gandalf, the bridge was simply too narrow for them to have been able to do much. You could only pass across it in single file, and there were hundreds of orcs on the other side of the Balrog, hurling arrows their way. Balrogs truly were demons of the ancient world. They were created by Morgoth, the most powerful of the Valar, an even more formidable enemy than Sauron. Not only that, the company wasn't equipped for battle. Their hope was in secrecy, not war. They never planned nor wanted to pass through Moria. What it ultimately comes down to is trusting Gandalf and respecting his wishes. And remember what Elrond said, Gandalf will go, for this shall be his great task, and maybe the end of his labors. He'd be sent back after his great battle with Durin's Bane, until his labors had ended. The Fellowship story has a happy ending after all, just like this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.